All right. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. I don't know if anybody is actually trickling in from the Horology Hangouts, the new channel from JJ's group. Ali had a very nice show there right now. I should drop the link to it. It is a secondary channel that they are trying to grow. So if if you would like to support them, please feel free to subscribe right there. Um, I think I might need to restart myself. We will see. I'm having still problems with my keyboard, uh, and at any rate, for the most part, I don't know what I'm doing, which is just fine. At least I know what I'm talking about. In the early show today, we were talking about some of the results coming out of the um, Oak Collection Part 1 auction. I was also talking about the larger trends on the market. I was thinking that it's not a coincidence that last fall Christie's sold Jean Todt's private collection to the tune of 32 million Swiss francs in total. The ex-Ferrari team chief, Jean Todt. And this season, for Geneva, they had Passion for Time, which was Mohammed Zaman's collection, if I'm not mistaken, actually an Omani businessman and high-rolling watch collector. And for Hong Kong, they had the first part of the Oak collection, Oak being an abbreviation of one of a kind. And this is Patrick Getreide, who had just organized an exhibition of a nice selection from his collection at the London Design Museum just last year, where Nick Fox had served as the curator, if I'm not mistaken. And Nick Fox is, of course, the person who wrote the book on the Reverso, who wrote the impossible collection of watches, I want to say, for Assouline. Um, and perhaps most famously, he's the person who has penned the official biography of Patek Philippe, which is basically everyone's favorite book. So the hope was, after that exhibition, uh, parts of that collection, maybe the same 160 watches that were selected out of it, maybe even more of them would tour the world. But I guess I was just being naive. I guess I should have expected it. Ultimately, it turned out to be um, largely a PR event to sell those watches. JB, a member of the channel as well. YB Live, thank you so much. 1999, I appreciate you. And Sam, bonsoir. Bonsoir. Nate Dogg, nice to see you, man. Jean Todt did do well for himself. Also, again, ex Ferrari, Scuderia Ferrari chief, ex CEO of Ferrari himself, served as the president of FIA, and most recently holds the important title as Michelle Yeoh's husband, which is not a bad gig, I have to say. Sign me up for that. Now or whenever I am Jean Todt's age. So he's doing very well for himself, for sure. But coming back to the oak collection, so this is a selection from 600 some pieces that have been amassed by the businessman over decades and decades of collecting. He is the level of the collector who has a full-time watchmaker in-house, a full-time curator for his collection, whose name I always forget. It's not Nick Fox, because Nick Fox was the person putting together the museum exhibition, not his personal right-hand man. Not that there's anything bad about that, but I don't want to confuse the names and personalities. Anyway, this particular auction is coming on the heels of what happened in Geneva just at the beginning of the month, where Christie's had basically secured the right to sell these two personal collections, largely based on the success of them selling Jean Todt's collection for him last fall in Geneva, but also because they had given both of these collectors very nice guarantees. I don't mean it in the contractual sense, but that the exposure they would get, the reserve prices and the pre-auction estimates that were set were already quite generous, were already quite optimistic as well, perhaps we will discover in this instance, considering the state of the market. And what happened in Geneva added an additional fold into the story, because at the very last minute, in the 11th hour, so to speak, a third-party entity or individual came in and struck a deal with the collector, with Mohammed Zaman, and literally penned a deal for a third-party guarantee, which meant that they basically tied themselves down to buy every single lot for the lower end of the estimate if there were no other offers. And incidentally, this deal was reached so late in the game that the auction itself started about 45 minutes late on November 6th in Geneva. And practically every single estimate was raised, sometimes to the fact, almost always significantly, and sometimes to the factor of 3 times. For example, the Marlon Brando GMT that sold for more than twice that it sold for last time had its estimates raised by 3 times. So not only did every single piece from that collection sold for the lower end of the estimates, the lower ends of the estimates were oftentimes raised, doubled or tripled. And you can see for this auction, for the oak collection, which was just sold earlier today in Hong Kong, they would have benefited from a third-party guarantee, because a number of watches that were really the heaviest hitters of this collection were not sold at all. But I wanna start with a watch tonight that I think is a very nice example. I've covered some pieces from the collection earlier today, but if you have anything else in mind, of course, always feel free to drop in a super chat with the lot number, and I would be more than happy to pull it up for you. Your friend Mikey, my friend Mikey, please take care, sleep well. Yes, Nate Dogg, this is more or less what happened. But to be clear, it wasn't Christie's, but a third party who stepped in as the guarantor. They could have struck a deal where they would be the guarantor, and I would understand that. And that it's in and of itself is also legal, even though quite uncommon in the world of watches. But it was a third party, actually. And Nate Dogg, yes, that was a central tourbillon, and that's actually a piece that I covered in the early show today, but I would be more than happy to pull it up for you right now. Nate Dogg was talking about lots 25, 24, which is one of only 10 pieces, as you can see, inscribed on a plaque at 6 o'clock. This is designed by Moritz Grimm and André Beiner, who also were the two watchmakers who came up with the design of the first automatic tourbillon for AP, for Audemars Piguet, in the mid-80s. That watch comes up once every so often on this channel because it's a majestic work of Egyptomania, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. It's very thin, it's very elegant. It's the first self-winding tourbillon ever. It is also one of the thinnest. It's the first one that has a titanium cage. I can wax poetic about it for, on and on and on. I do want to bring it up very quickly because it shares that lineage with the central tourbillon. But I also don't want to take away too much from what we are talking about here. This is from the early 2000s, but it is based on a prototype that's Grimm and Beiner designed for Omega. It literally puts the tourbillon cage at the focal point of a watch, hence the central tourbillon. The cage takes on the brand's symbol, the Greek letter omega, also as part of its design. There's a blued lozenge-shaped seconds hand that, of course, takes advantage of the fact that this is a 1-minute tourbillon, so that central core of the watch is also a subsidiary dial for seconds, and you have those two hands for the hour and minutes that extends from that central cage. Bronze colored guilloche dial that has 12 equal sectors. Beautiful look on this pink gold case, 39 millimeters. Beautifully designed itself with spider-like lugs, very nicely sculpted and stepped. I think overall it's a beautiful design that also is matched with an 18-karat pink gold deployant clasp. And that was one of the pieces that actually sold. And the hammer price realized earlier today was actually 189,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is a little over 24,250 in US dollars. Okay. If I can ask for your patience for a minute, I think I really need to restart because it's so hard to navigate if I stay like this. So please hit the like button. I will respond to Sam. Good night, my friend. I will respond to Swinging Kangaroos super chats. $4.99. Hope you had a great holiday week. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Swinging. Cheers from Michigan. I like the red one with red straps. I don't mean to follow the Mr. Wonderful color theme. This is so funny. This was also a watch that I took a look at because another member of the audience sent in a super chat to take a look at these. These are there are two. So lot 2525 and lot 2526 are two Seamaster chronographs from 1970. Apparently, both of them with prototype dials. That were made to test out some new colorways. They do come with an archival extract from Omega, which I'm really not sure what it's worth at this point in time. I covered on this channel the kind of the aftermath of the whole debacle about the Speedmaster that never was. And in that process, Omega had laid down a series of allegations against Petros Protopapas, who has been let go since, who used to be the head of brand heritage and the director of the Omega Museum. But that being said, these are two pieces with two prototype dials, part of a small batch delivered to Norman M. Morris Corporation. The orange one had actually a matching bracelet. This one comes with a red leather strap that picks off the red accents on the dial, and it has a déployant strap too. What I really like about these watches, I think, is, of course, the combination of two perennially popular sports watch genres. This is a Seamaster chronograph. I know people usually don't like Seamaster chronographs because an Omega chronograph kind of has to be a Speedmaster. Incidentally, this watch is built on caliber 861, which, having replaced 321 around the same time, perhaps has as much or as strong of an association with the Moon watch over the years. It has a beautiful brown dial with red chronograph registers, as well as a red seconds track, and of course a bidirectional inner rotatable bezel that can be manipulated with an extra crown. At 10 o'clock, I also adore the case shape, which is like an elongated cushion case, or really a real barrel shape, what the French call tonneau. Gorgeously finished as well, which gives it kind of this look of an almost spaceship. I really, really do like it. And this is one of the watches that didn't sell, actually. The estimates were really high on both of these numbers, lots 2025 and 2026. Again, the estimates are high because that was one way that Christie's used to convince the collectors to sell these collections with them, right? They're, even in this market where more and more high rolling collectors decide to let go of at least some of their watches, you still need to make a strong case as an auction house or as a watch dealer for these people to let go of their watches. In this case, the relatively high, generous, optimistic, whatever you want to call it, pre-auction estimates were part of it. This one was set around 650 to 1,300,000 in Hong Kong dollars, and that's actually at its low end is in excess of 83,000 in US dollars. So it's not really a surprise for me that it's sold. Ali, would you like to choose a watch to talk about while I restart?
I will go look at the link then and find one.
Okay, let's see. Let's find your watch first. I will send the link in the chat.
It says Christie's.
Yeah, the one-of-a-kind collection, so to speak, the oak collection. So the link is in the chat as well again. Ali Reza once again very generously gifted 5 memberships, and welcome Damasco, JPCWC, Thomas Broadbent, The Watch Mamba, and Am Israel Chai. This, my friend, this. Amazing.
Salt is in there. The you know what? There is lot 2536. I don't even think I've ever heard of this watch.
Okay. It's beautiful. I like that. It's Breguet tourbillon. I've also rarely seen their tourbillons installed in a tonneau-shaped case. So
I don't think I've ever seen this. You said you need to go restart?
Yeah, and I'm realizing now when I restart, this will go. So let's at least talk about this before, and maybe start talking about this before together, and we will go.
Well, what happens if I share? Can you add my screen?
I can, and I think that might also just disappear while I'm restarting. But let's see.
We'll find out in a second, I guess.
But let's start talking about it together, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, first of all, I'm shocked at how good this looks.
To me, what's interesting is that it does carry all those wonderful details that make the Breguet quote-unquote empire case so special, right? The teardrop lug styling, the fluting of the case here on the sides, even though it's a very different shape than the standard Breguet case.
I haven't. I'm surprised I haven't come across this at all. That's unremarkable. So we got 35 by 50 mil. That's a good size even for me. Although I think it was 300,000. Yeah, so it's not happening.
And
2010, it's that new?
Yeah, it's relatively new. And what I really like, one of my pet peeves is when these great makers make a platinum watch and then match it with a like white gold déployant clasp or something because they're cheap. They didn't do it on this one, so it's matched with a platinum déployant, which is great. Since it's a platinum watch, it only makes sense. And of course, it's I mean, again, it's a dial that is very Breguet, but also extremely Art Deco with those elongated Roman numerals.
Yeah. This is so well executed.
Yeah, you see how they integrated the Roman numeral 6 into the tourbillon cage as well?
Yeah.
And the frame, and this reminds me of the vertical tourbillon that Jean more recently introduced in 2019, that's vertically installed, but it has this frame around it that's mirror polished to kind of enhance the spectacle. This has the same idea as well. You look at that mirror polished frame around the tourbillon cage.
Dude, Swatch Group needs to leave Breguet alone.
I mean, the funny thing is, I think when the father was alive, it was different, because the Tradition series, or Tradition, whatever you want to call it, even though that looks like a 19th century pocket watch, it is something introduced by the Swatch Group in 2005, right? And this clearly, coming from 2010, it's also a Swatch Group product. But I completely agree with you. Somewhere along the lines, they lost the plot and stopped making great watches like this and try to just do what everyone else does, and without much thought. There are a lot of things that I still like about some of the more recent releases, but overall, I just can't really enjoy them in the same way.
So Nate Dogg, I'm gonna have to say that I actually and young Brandon and I have spoken about the Culpa a number of times, and I do like quite a few of the Culpas, but I'm gonna have to say that I disagree with you in terms of the dial. Other than in a tonneau-shaped case, is you're going to have two subdials or more than one subdial complication, vertically aligning them the way the tourbillon and the dial is here is common. But this to me evokes, if somebody sat down and said they want Breguet to do Cartier better than Cartier does, this is what would happen. It'd be like Breguet teaching Cartier a lesson. Now, again, the Cartier, I mean, I wish I hadn't discontinued even the drive. It's its own unique beast, but this is phenomenal how they've integrated like the framing of the dial and the inner riot of the dial with, I mean, I guess that's what I would call it, the inner riot of the dial itself, because it's not the inner riot of the watch, with the actual Roman numerals. That's just phenomenal. That's just phenomenal. And it has original box papers.
Amazing. It did work, right?
Yeah, it did work. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I think this is fun. This is phenomenal. I mean, way out of my price range, but phenomenal. The I was actually gonna ask you, have you heard of Every Watch yet?
The name sounds familiar. Where do I know that from? Oh, yes. I just talked about it when I was when I did this whole thing on the generations of FP Jean tourbillon.
Okay.
Because they had a very good survey of how these pieces performed over the years in auctions. So it was very practical, very good to use for me, and it saved me a lot of time.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I hadn't heard of them until when I got back from my trip. And I I thought if I had heard of it, I would have heard of it from you. So, uh,
Yeah, I just talked about it last Tuesday when I was doing that long segment on um, generations and different references of the FP Jean Tourbillon and how they performed in auctions, which is a new segment that I do with another episode coming up on Patek Philippe minute repeaters, and a third episode coming up on some iconic Rolex sports watches yet to be decided.
is this the rare, the RAAR?
Yeah, rar. to
Yeah,
be as cringy as possible, I have to come up with something obnoxious. So I said, "Why not rar?" But yeah, that's it. But yeah, by the way, that piece is not that expensive in the sense that it's sold for uh, a little more than $35,000 for a Breguet Tourbillon. That's not really outrageous. I mean, it's not
Wait, hold
cheap.
on. I thought Hong Kong. What? What exchange rate am I off of?
You divide it by 8, roughly.
Son of a gun! I would
Yeah.
have bought that.
Well,
I would have bought it just to have it.
I wish you knew at the right time. Of course, you add about 25% on top of it for
That's
the
still
premium.
for. I mean, my
But it's,
only concern would be ever getting it serviced. But holy cow!
I mean,
Like
it's a
I'm
platinum.
literally gonna buy. I'm gonna buy a fairer tonneau shaped case just because I want a tonneau shaped case on my wrist for a few weeks.
Yeah, this is kind of like the king of all kings when it comes to that, right? You get a Breguet tourbillon, you get a beautiful tonneau-shaped case
in
with
platinum.
Art Deco dial in platinum.
This is insane.
It's a beautiful piece.
But I'm still, after the Kalpas, and I'm still struggling. I'm gonna end up with a tonneau shaped watch at some point. So I'm literally gonna buy a fair, um, for $1,000 to have a tonneau shaped case on my wrist for a few weeks and then give it to my daughter. Look at the guilloche on that. Mother of God, that's so pretty.
Yeah, it's a proper Breguet watch, and in a way, both very appropriately that, but also something quite unique. It doesn't really look like any other Breguet. It doesn't look like any other Breguet Tourbillon either. None of the classics, at any rate.
Well, while you were restarting, I said something which might be a little bit heresy, but I was like, if Breguet was going to sit down and say, Cartier, hold my beer, that's what this is.
Why not?
It's like the way that they framed the dial with the Roman numerals and the architecture and they've combined like a sunburst with a piece of architecture and then the guilloche, then the inner indices, the two-tone color of the inner indices, just so well done. This is insane. I've never even heard of this damn watch.
Yeah, honestly, this is also, the second or third time I see it on auction. And granted, I haven't been so obsessively combing through auction results before the last 2 years, but it's certainly much more rare than the round-cased examples. That's for sure. I mean, of course, the 3350 Breguet is an absolute classic when it comes to the tourbillon, but I feel like maybe I would rather have something like this. But then again, I do like odd case shapes. I do like Art Deco design. And yeah, that's a beautiful dial as well.
Yeah, I think this is phenomenal. I really like this. So I did want to drop by. I wanted to drop a couple of memberships on people. I want to say hello. When I am starting to feel better day by day, but I'm gonna go get some rest because I'm pretty wiped out. I'll
Of course.
as I recover, I'll definitely join you for a proper show.
Man, thank you so much for dropping by, and thank you for those gift memberships. I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure people who grab them do as well.
And Dis, if you're still out there, man, love to you, brother. All right, folks, you have a good night, and definitely I'll come back when I'm feeling proper to stick around for a show, man. Take care.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care. All right, Ali was here. It was very nice to have him. We got the chance to talk about a couple of watches, of course, with Swing and Kangaroo. And earlier with Nate Dogg, we looked at a few pieces. Nate Dogg says also, as a Breguet owner, my 7057 is a toy watch compared to this. I mean, I like the sentiment. I find it hard to agree because I really love the Tradition series. So I don't want to really bring that down to exalt this beautiful piece. But that being said, I kind of get what you mean. Speaking of the Tradition series, there was a piece on this auction at the Oak Collection Part 1 that did not sell, and that was a representative of the Tradition or Tradition series, the reference 7067, which is the GMT version. It has the same idea where most of the movements is laid out on the main plate in an open worked fashion with an off-center dial that is fashioned out of a gold blank, engine turned by hand and silvered in classic Breguet style, affixed with those two heat blued screws, which match the tones of the heat blued stainless steel hands for the hour and minutes, Breguet styled. There's also a day and night indicator and an open worked black dial for reference time, another off-center dial. There's a pusher, as you can see, at 10 o'clock, roughly speaking, that allows you to jump the time. Exhibition case back. A frosted finish on the movements, which on the bridges of the movements, which harkens back to the finishes of pocket watch movements, even though, of course, the aesthetic with this gunmetal gray tone is much more modern, much more contemporary. There's a power reserve indicator on the back as well, a déployant clasp to match the white gold case. Which is 40 millimeters. 40 millimeters for this style of the case wears relatively large, I have to say. Perfectly round with a nice domed bezel that frames the dial really well, but the extended teardrop-shaped lugs give the watch a lot of presence on the wrist, so it will wear slightly large than what you might expect from 40 millimeters on paper. I just wanted to put that out there. And that, by the way, I think is once again a beautiful watch. And a very interesting execution of the GMT. Ali, thank you so much. This is so generous. Ali is also a member of the channel, of course, who has earlier gifted 5 memberships as well. Thank you so much for your support and also for the sentiments you're expressing in your super chats as well. Again, happy belated Thanksgiving. Happy holidays to everybody. Whatever it is that you celebrate, I appreciate you. Frank and honest, it's nice to see you as well. Nate Dogg propagates for Daniel Roth. And Nate Dogg says, what you can buy in terms of Breguet under 30K USD is astounding. Just saw a Breguet Tourbillon 5357 for 30K. Absolutely. This watch that didn't even sell, for example, could be had before the premium, obviously, for around $20,000. The estimated value of the piece before the auction was set in the range between 160,000 to 320,000 Hong Kong dollars, and that's again is a little more than 20,500 at the lower end of the estimates when converted to US dollars. I have a soft spot for Breguet, and I really want to add a 3130 or 3137 to my collection sooner than later. It's that classic dress watch with an asymmetric dial that Daniel Roth adapted from pocket watch number 5, designed, of course, originally by none other than Abraham Louis Breguet himself. Another watch that I really like here, that's not necessarily one of a kind or anything, but that I always appreciate. Breguet has always had some great chronographs in the Classique series. This is a relatively recent iteration of that. They're great looking watches, which have grown in terms of the case size. This is certainly the case with the watch you're looking at right now at lot 2529, a reference 5247, which is once again a 40 millimeter piece in white gold. But one thing that a lot of the hand-wound chronographs in this range have in common is, of course, the base movement they use. Classic Lemania CH27, otherwise known as caliber 2310, which we also know as the Moonwatch movement. It moonlights, no pun intended, as Omega 321. It also, of course, was the ébauche that Patek Philippe used, for example, for generations of perpetual calendar chronographs, not to mention quote-unquote solo chronographs as well. Breguet's execution and finishing of it is not less impressive, with a nice swan neck regulator as well. The white gold case is matched here with a white gold déployant clasp, but the dial has to be the highlight of the watch, with tachymeter snailed onto the center of the dial. Beautiful red accents there that pick up from the centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand. The chronograph hands, as well as the handset for hour and minutes, are in heat blued stainless steel. Of course, for hour and minutes, they are in the Breguet house style, so to speak. As you can see, the Roman numerals on that Breguet frosted track for the hours actually have that deep blue shade as well. And the finishing of the dial is, of course, exquisite. You have the hobnail pattern at that snailed center. You have the frosting, so to speak, on the hour track, this kind of circular grained finish, and every single sector of the dial is also framed with this coin-edged decoration as well. Stunning piece. Classic Breguet, maybe with a slight sporty touch, which is both expressed in the colorful accents and a slightly oversized case for the Breguet chronograph, and of course built on that classic Lemania CH27 caliber. Incidentally, today's Breguet manufacture is built on the remains of that facility, that Lemania manufacture, so it's only fitting. Build 29. I'm not sure. I wouldn't count on it, but the thing is, of course, okay, this is the so-called one-of-a-kind collection, right? But not every single thing is one of a kind. And you can actually find a number of examples of the Breguet chronograph on the secondary markets. There are so many different variations. There are even different case sizes if you want to go back to earlier years and earlier reference numbers. And this particular reference, 5247, you can basically find any day of the week, and even cheaper than the lower end of this estimate, which is slightly over $30,000. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, of course, this is a 600-piece collection. I don't know how many of these pieces Christie's is intending to sell. I don't know if the other parts of the collection are still going to be sold by Christie's or at all after the relative failure of this particular sale. But since this was only 130 some lots, people were already expecting at least one or two more parts of this auction. Honestly, I'm expecting still at least another selection from the collection in the spring. I don't think they're having it in New York for December, but I'm thinking that it will be part of the spring season in Geneva. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I know some of the examples are extremely unique. So, of course, those may or may not go on sale again, may or may not be sold by Christie's. But the other pieces, like the Breguet chronograph that we were looking at, they might come back. They might come back in the later installments from this collection. There's a platinum limited edition Marine for the 200th anniversary. Of Breguet being appointed as the master watchmaker for the French Royal Navy. This is inscribed on the dial, as you can see, from 1815 to 2015. This was a platinum example of the Marine self-winding chronograph with flyback functionality. There's a 12-hour counter at 6 o'clock, which integrates that date window. There's a continuous running seconds subdial at 9 o'clock. The minute counter is actually centrally deployed hand with an anchor detail on the counterweight, which depending on where you look at it, depending on your perspective, is either very endearing or very tacky. I don't know where I land on this particular thing, on this particular issue. The dial itself, I think, is actually very attractive for the Marine. Black with engine turn decoration. The model number is 5823, one of only 200 pieces. And it also has the wave-like rotor that is also guilloche decorated, and for this edition blackened for the self-winding movements. Number 84 out of 200 examples. And also comes with the matching platinum déployant clasp. This was lot 2530. For the limited edition Breguet Marine chronograph from the last generation with the flyback functionality, platinum case, black dial, reference number is 5823. The piece actually sold for $277,200 in Hong Kong dollars, which is almost 35,600 in US dollars. NNN Jake Brooks, $4.99. A member of the channel as well, so I really appreciate you, JB. 25644 TR gets to 10K. Would there be value? This is, of course, the UTM chronograph that has this stunning two-tone execution that uses a combination of tantalum and pink gold, which is something that AP used relatively extensively in their catalog at one point in time. I really like how the pink gold details pop out of the gunmetal gray color scheme of the watch. I think the UTM chronograph is a beautiful design. I even like the excessive branding. You know, it's inscribed on the bezel. It's there with the initial logo right next to the date window, and it's there in the signature as well. I think it's a watch that's at once very elegant and kind of sporty in its own way. I like the design of the case, which actually is very classical, nice and round with short stubby lugs. And I also really like the fact that the dial mimics the same tones as the case, both in terms of the larger gunmetal gray backdrop, but also the pink gold details. I think if these, frankly, if you should grab one of these if they can be acquired at $10,000 range in decent condition. I think they are around $14,000-15,000 now. Maybe you can find an example at around 13. I think around 10,000 it would be a steal. If they drop to that price range, I would highly recommend it because, again, it's not a watch you see every day. It's a very nice chronograph. I think the Frédéric Piguet 1185 movements get a bad rep, but they're not actually that bad, and they can be fixed by any watchmaker worth their salt. You don't have to send everything back to AP for service. And ultimately, I think they're also relatively rare, right? So it's not, unless there's something else going on the world where we wouldn't be worried too much about watches, I don't see these going back down to be sold for a few $1,000s anytime soon. So if they are in high four figures or low tens, low five figures, I think that would be a great deal for these. Thank you, JB, for your contribution. I really, really do appreciate it. Yeah, you know, that's my thing with chronographs. That's why I love the old school revival of Type 20, which I actually own in the Aéronaval execution in the reference 3800 so much, because it does not have a date. And I really don't like how that date pops off like that. I think it's too large. I don't like the font. I wish it were not there. But then again, it is what it is. You can't always get what you want, yada, yada, yada. There's an interesting piece that did not sell, a single button chronograph, again from that era of Breguet that mostly remains unspoken when they were owned by the Brown family still, and where they were commissioned to make a number of tool watches, mostly by the French Navy, but also sometimes by special customers, as well as some interesting bespoke dress watches as well from this era. This is kind of like a watch that's like pre-Type 20, and you can think of the diagonal placement of the chronograph registers in the same vein, with the same logic as the slanted dial of driver's watches, like the Vacheron Constantin American 1921. There's a 30-minute totalizer at 2 o'clock and a continuous running seconds subdial at 8 o'clock. And of course, this is all in addition to the centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand, a nice onion crown at 2 o'clock as well, with an integrated single button for the operation of the chronograph, 38 millimeter stainless steel case. It's marked reference 343 on the dial, inscribed at 6 o'clock. It also has a gorgeous bezel and rotating bezel. Which is very interesting and traditional. And it's a style of the bezel, as you guys remember, that they revived in the new Type 20s. This is a watch that is called the Borma. It was a civilian special order for a client of Maison Borma, and it is from 1952. So it's a watch that predates Breguet's Type 20 commission as well. Therefore, it is a watch that lives up to that one-of-a-kind, quote-unquote, moniker, more than many other examples. It has a 14 ligne caliber in it. Really a thing of beauty. Of course, it is kind of overshadowed by the fact that, one, it did not sell, and the estimate was perhaps overly optimistic, set between 1,900,000 to 3,800,000, and it was lot 2538, and as you know, lot 2537, which was a Breguet diver's watch was a piece that friend of the channel, Jose Perez, Periscope, presented a number of allegations and inconsistencies on in terms of how it differs from a number of legitimate pieces that were sold within that genre. That watch didn't sell either, but I still wanted to take a look at both of them. I showed you lot 2537 in the early show. Wanted to go over the 2538s for tonight's show as well. Lot 2541 is a very rare piece, again, living up to the moniker. Now, seeing a white metal Lange 1, you might think of if you were asking about the chronograph that we were just looking at, Bild 29, that was the pusher for the chronograph. It's a single button chronograph, so that's what it was. All right, so we were looking at lot 2541 now, which is a white metal Lange 1. Of course, I wouldn't begrudge you for thinking that this is white gold or platinum, but what you're looking at is actually a very rare version of the Lange 1, one that was incidentally executed in stainless steel, incredibly rare, as a special edition in 1996. Apparently, it was retailed by Pisa Orologeria, an Italian jeweler, which commissioned 20 examples of the Lange 1 from A. Lang & Söhne in 1997. Apparently, Cellini in New York received 4 examples, and 2 other retailers, one in Singapore, one in Germany as well. That shall explain the documents you are seeing in front of you from 1998, stamped by Rüschenbeck, V. Rüschenbeck, Duisburg-based German retailer. That's old school Lange 1 movements with the islands on the 3/4 plane, which are indicative of the gear train, of the JLC gear train that is laid out under it. One of the beautiful things, of course, about this German silver 3/4 plates, it being an alloy of nickel, zinc, and copper, it takes on this charming patina over the years, a yellowish hue, a champagne-like tint. Looks great. But all in all, this is really a fantastic piece, a very rare example of a stainless steel Lange 1. And apparently, when Pisa Orologeria, which is based in Milan, first approached Lange with this, he was turned down. The second time, they actually accepted his wishes and granted him a special run with the understanding that it would cost exactly the same as a precious metal version. And that is the origin story of these relatively, well, extremely rare run of stainless steel Lange 1 pieces, even though they were understood to be a 20-piece run. Potentially, there were only 5 made. I guess that is something that can be or should be double-checked with Alango & Söhne, but in either case, you're looking at a very rare and special watch indeed. And it's no surprise that this was one of the watches that actually did sell and performed relatively well. The pre-auction estimate was set within the range between 1,400,000 to 2,850,000 in Hong Kong dollars. And the watch finally sold for 1,764,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is more than 225,000 in US dollars. Again, not an astonishingly successful result, considering how it's closer to the lower end of the pre-auction estimates than the higher end. But this is one of the pieces that, perhaps thanks to its rarity, performed fairly well on this auction. We're looking at the one-of-a-kind collection part 1, which is a single-owner collection that was exhibited at the London Design Museum last year, and that is being sold by Christie's now, with the first installment of the auction held in Hong Kong. We looked at some of the interesting examples from this selection earlier today. Some fascinating Omega chronographs, interesting examples of mostly limited edition Glashütte Original pieces, a number of rare Omega Speedmasters, and selections from the museum collection. We have also looked at the Deville Central Tourbillon, as well as 2 Seamaster chronographs from 1970 with what are called prototype dials. We have looked at a number of interesting Breguet pieces, some of which are quite rare or otherwise part of a limited edition. And we were just looking at an example of a stainless steel Lange 1, which by all accounts is practically a unicorn. Lot 2542 is Datograph Perpetual. This is the perpetual calendar chronograph by Alango & Söhne with a platinum case and a stunning argenté dial. Of course, this is essentially a datograph with a perpetual calendar module. so it preserves a lot of the aesthetic cues of those early datographs with the Roman numerals placed in that triangular form, as if it's a reverse triangle facing 6 o'clock. The oversized date at 12 o'clock. There's a nice aperture for the moon phase indicator at 6 o'clock. The calendar, as you can see, is actually in Italian, with the days of the week ensconced in the continuous running seconds at 8 o'clock, and the months as well as the leap year indicator integrated into or else overlapping with the 30-minute totalizer at 4 o'clock. Alpha-styled hands inlaid with luminous material for the hour and minutes. Centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand in heat-blued stainless steel. The other chronograph hands are also alpha-styled and heat-blued, which adds a nice dash of color to the otherwise monochromatic look of the dial. Of course, it picks off beautifully that night sky backdrop of the moon phase indicator as well. There's a great look at that caliber, which has the feeling of an urban landscape with so many different layers, or maybe even an archaeological dig. Of course, the freehand engraved balance cock with a swan neck regulator as well. All these heat-blued screws and the rubies set into the gold chaton, all of which exquisite details of Lange movements, especially impressive in examples of the chronograph. Platinum matched with a platinum tang buckle, a 41 millimeter case for this perpetual calendar chronograph with flyback functionality. Of course, a leap year indicator, moon phase indicator, and right here, as you can see, is a day and night indicator that overlaps with the subsidiary dial for the seconds at 8 o'clock as well. This is also a piece that sold. Again, performed decently. Lots 2542 at Datograph Perpetual, reference 410025 from Alang und Söhne. The hammer price was 567,000 in Hong Kong dollars, which is right around 72,800 in US dollars. So as you can see, decent enough in terms of the performance, but depending on how you're looking in today's markets, it might even be considered a decent bargain. Lot 2543 was the double split. Lange introduced the Lange's double split chronograph was the first of its kind when it was introduced in 2004. It's an impressive hunk of metal on the wrist. This particular example is executed in platinum, 43.2 millimeters in diameter and 15.3 millimeters in thickness. As you can see, on top of the double split flyback inscription, there's a power reserve indicator in the form of an up and down, up und auf. Great. Alan Gonzone uses their signatures and inscriptions so well on the dial to give everything a sense of coherence and balance, which is certainly the case here, with the branding wrapping itself around 12 o'clock on the rejo, which integrates the tachymeter. And as you can see, the double splits allows you to not only time two intervals in quick succession, but also do that down to the minute and the second at the same time. As you can see, the 30-minute totalizer also has a split hand, which splits the seconds just as it does, it splits the minutes just as it does the seconds. Here's a look at that split second, split minutes movement with the additional flyback functionality from the case back. Lange was later to come out with the triple splits. The introduction of that was in 2018, and it was only in 2019 that they introduced the 1815 rattrapante, which was their first solo rattrapante, so to speak, after they had already worked on the... No, actually it was 2020 where they introduced it. Anyway, but that kind of should give you an idea about how Lange goes, how they proceed in terms of their operation, right? They make a big splash. They, if anything, they overdo things at the first try. They introduce the double splits first, then they bring out the triple splits, which of course splits seconds, minutes, and hours, and they leave the quote-unquote simple split-second chronograph or rattrapante to the very last. But this was the double split flyback by Alan Gonzone in platinum, the world's first at lot 2543. The piece had a pre-auction estimate of 520,000 to 1,040,000 in Hong Kong dollars. It did not sell, and the lower end of that estimate was right around 67,000 US dollars. So it's very worrying for the people on the market who are looking to sell. This is not a good result at all, because this is a very good watch, but it's also quite niche. So for all its horological accomplishments. It's not the kind of watch that you can move out of, it seems, at least not anymore, at the snap of your fingers. So that tells you something about the current trends on the markets, which have been on a very distinct downward turn for quite some time. Some people called this by other names, correction and whatever else. I think it is simply a market crash, and I don't think I can see any signs of it abating just yet. So we're looking into or onto 2024 with the expectation that the prices will continue to drop. Of course, you know, I don't give any investment advice on this channel, but that's how I see things. So I feel always obliged to share this with you as a fellow collector and also as someone who consults other collectors on these matters on a more one-to-one and professional basis. So just to take a note of that, this was one of the pieces that did not sell, as impressive as it was horologically speaking. We looked at lot 2547 as well as 2549 back to back. These were two pieces from that famed CP collection by Cartier. This was a series of watches from a decade between 1998 and 2008, often produced in very limited editions and at the crossroads of iconic designs by the Parisian house meet complicated, or even when it is time only, high horological movements that were oftentimes conceived by emerging independent watchmakers as well. These two single button chronographs are important because they're also built on the caliber 045 MC, which was designed by François Porjon and Denis Flageolet when they were at the time working as THA, Technique Horlogère Appliquée, working on specifically these kinds of commissions for high-level, recognizable brands rather than making their own watches. Of course, I don't need to tell you about what François Porjon did and what F.B. Jean became. And many of you will also know that Denis Flageolet is the horological mastermind behind De Bethune. Lot 2547 was a slightly oversized, very muscular and impressive version of the tank, executed in 18-karat white gold as a single button chronograph. All the distinctive markings of a CP watch, down to the dial produced from a gold blank, engine turned and silvered, the Cartier Paris signature. The handset is entirely heat blued and in the style that is more often associated with Breguet for the hour and minutes. There's the secret signature of Cartier at 7 o'clock, hidden right there in the V part of the Roman numeral 7. And the octagonal crown is topped off by a sapphire cabochon and it also functions as the single button, as the monopusher for the chronograph, which gives the watch overall a very tidy look. Here is how it looks from behind, and here's how that caliber that was fashioned by François Bourgeon and Denis Flageolet looks as well, with the bridges of the chronograph decorated excessively and very elegantly, I have to say, with the double wishbone logo of Cartier, more haute couture than haute horlogerie, but we can make do with that. And the watch is also presented on a leather strap with a matching déployant clasp. This one at lot 2547 sold for 352,800. One of only 100 examples of this watch, a little more than 45,000 in US dollars. And as I mentioned, lot 2549 is a cousin of this watch, maybe a more recognizable cousin. I think more people know about this Tortue monopoussoir, this recreation of a Cartier classic from the Roaring 20s, as a modern single button chronograph, and the white gold version of this piece, especially with the single oversized Roman numeral at 12 o'clock, is perhaps the most desirable model of it all. It takes on that classic tonneau-shaped Cartier case that is named as Tortue à pattes, a turtle on its legs. And very beautifully, by the way, the details and inscriptions on the dial are actually in a deep blue tone, which matches beautifully with both the heat blued hands for the timekeeping, as well as the chronograph, not to mention the multifaceted sapphire that is set on top of the crown. By the way, on the one hand, I hate to be pedantic, but sometimes I hear this and I see this written about the precious stones or synthetic materials that top crowns of some dress watches, especially Cartier watches, and people call all of them generically cabochon. Cabochon actually refers to a particular cut. Let's put it this way. If the gemstone is shaped and polished in this rounded way, in this convex fashion that you would see in a synthetic form with many of stainless steel Cartier watches today, it would be this rounded, protruded spinel. That is a cabochon, right? Technically, that's the finish, a rounded, smooth finish. When it is multifaceted, it is a multifaceted sapphire. It's not a cabochon. Okay, short rant over. Not that anyone cares, but I really do adore the movements in these pieces, especially the more famous reference 2396. I think it's a more elegant piece Not that I have anything against tank, but to me, the tank is more interesting when it's daintier, when it's smaller, or when it's in one of its variations, asymmetric. For example, is a great one. I like the basculante as well, kind of tank, a tank reversal, so to speak, right? Rectangular piece that has a swiveling component, that has a turnaround component. I guess it is getting late for me, so I'm kind of blanking out on my variations. But of course, I love the tank centré, the curved and elongated version of it. The Américain, which is kind of the more streamlined version of that, so on and so forth. Not that I have anything against the traditional Cartier tank normal design. That's great too. It's just the chronograph version I feel is a little too big for what it is. But this is again one of the watches that are extremely popular from the CP series. Rightly so, because it brings together that still relatively underappreciated collection with two independent watchmakers who are in vogue now but who were only emerging at the time. This is lot 2549, the Cartier Tortue single button chronograph in the much desired white gold version with the oversized single Roman numeral at 12 o'clock. It sold earlier today for 378,000 Hong Kong dollars. And that is more than 48,500 in US dollars. Once again, a good result, but nothing too impressive or groundbreaking, right in the middle of the pre-auction estimates range. That was lot 2549. Please hit the like button if you have not already. Mine is a very small channel, so it really makes a huge difference for me to have, say, 35, 50 likes compared to 15 or 20. So I would really appreciate that. Lot 2554, speaking of variations of the tank, this is the tank asymétrique in platinum, the very first example, perhaps the prototype, because this is number 000 out of 100 from year 1996 in platinum with a blue sapphire cabochon. You see, that's a cabochon on a beaded crown. The octagonal crown is usually matched with a multifaceted gemstone. This is more elegant, quote-unquote, dressier execution, perhaps, matching the beaded crown with the sapphire cabochon, which matches beautifully, of course, with this sword-styled hands, the slanted dial, and the asymmetric case with Arabic numerals that alternates with simple baton style hour markers. And of course, you have the Cartier Paris signature on the dial, which is silvered and engine turned. Beautiful platinum piece. The first example, perhaps the prototype of the Tank Asymétrique from 1996 in platinum, matching with a white gold Cartier déployant clasp. You guys know that's my absolute pet peeve. Platinum watch matched with a white gold clasp. But what can you do? That is lot 2554, which sold for 630,000 Hong Kong dollars. And that was basically 80,900 in US dollars. That was one of the better results for the seller from the Oak Collection Part 1 at Christie's Hong Kong earlier today. If you want me to take a closer look at any of the lots, feel free to click that link and send in the lot number with a super chat. I'm going to try to go through as many as possible if I can. In the meantime, I think I'll be live for another hour or so. But of course, if there are any special requests, I will do my best to oblige, as always. You are the ones who make this possible. You are the ones who make this worth it at the end of the day, and you are the ones who keep the lights on with their contributions. So I would do practically anything watch related for you. With that in mind, we are looking at 2555, lot number 2555, which is the very popular Cartier Crash. This is made in France example of the Crash in 18 karat white gold, diamond set on the case, matched with an 18 karat gold déployant clasp with a hand wound movement. As you can see, even the buckle of the déployant clasp takes after that seemingly melting surrealist design of the case. This is the classic red box presentation from Cartier. The piece also comes with its certificate of origin. And as you can see, it does have a multifaceted diamond that tops off the beaded crown. Beautifully finished silver dial with the elongated Roman numerals, the secret signature at 7, and kind of a grenet finish with an off-white color on the dial. Lot 2555, which is a rare 18 karat white gold diamond set version of the Cartier Crash, is a watch that sold for 693,000 in Hong Kong dollars, which is practically 89,000 in US dollars. So we're looking at the results from the Oak Collection Part 1 from earlier today. I wanted to take a look at these perpetual calendar chronographs in platinum from Vacheron Constantin, back to back in lots 2558 to 2559. In the current lineup, the Maltz is represented with a tonneau cased watch, but in the early 2000s, Vacheron Constantin also had these round cases in their Maltz series with stylized lugs that are perhaps some of the most distinctive design details and aesthetic flourishes of the Genevan maker. Here it is a stepped lug shape that splays out and is in a design that I can only liken to the talons of a falcon or an eagle, like a Maltese eagle, perhaps. This is a 39 millimeter platinum case. As you can see, it also has a beautiful disc there for the moon phase indicator that is hand engraved, if I'm not mistaken, with an anthropomorphic depiction of the moon. That aperture for the moon phase indicator is encircled by a pointer dates with a red arrow, a broadsword hands, beautifully finished, black centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand, a 30-minute totalizer at 3 o'clock, continuous running seconds at 9 o'clock, 2 apertures for the day of the week and the month, and an elliptical porthole like opening right above the 30-minute totalizer for the leap year indicator. This is the Maltz perpetual calendar chronograph, hinged case back. It's incidentally, this is a perpetual calendar chronograph that is built on the Lemania CH27 Eboche, which you can see here. Nicely finished, although not with lots of flourish, I have to say. A swan neck regulator, which is de rigueur for Genevan watchmaker. This is reference 47112 in platinum, matched with a platinum tang buckle for this perpetual calendar chronograph by Vacheron Constantin, housed in a very elegant 39 millimeter Maltz case. This was lot 2558, which sold for 478,800. around 61,500 in US dollars. Not cheap by any means, but quite an interesting proposition because of how hard these are to find in this particular configuration, in platinum especially. And 2559 is basically the successor to that model. As you know, the design is slightly changed. The piece has a bigger case, 42 millimeters this time, rather than 39. It has piston-styled pump pushers instead of the rectangular ones. There are otherwise slight quirks, slight cosmetic differences in terms of the dial, which in this limited edition is actually itself fashioned out of platinum. This was kind of a prestige collection by Vacheron Constantin at the time, called Excellence Platine, where you would have platinum watches with platinum dials, kind of, over-the-top watchmaking that honors the various levels of expertise that Vacheron Constantin has in-house. The platinum watch here is matched with a platinum Vacheron Constantin déployant clasp that integrates that Maltese cross reference. Of course, this piece comes as a full set with all the details, all the accessories. It is built on the same Lemania CH27 base movements, one of only 50 pieces, reference 4712 from the Excellence Platine collection. Platinum case, 42 millimeters, platinum dial for this perpetual calendar chronograph that is built on the Nouvelle Lemania base. Lot 2559 was again one of those examples, one of those pieces that performed fairly well. It sold for 567,000 in Hong Kong dollars. And that is a hammer price which is slightly above 72,800 in US dollars. Bill, I do appreciate your questions, but please be more specific, because this is a one-person show, right? So when I'm in the middle of a presentation, I don't exactly look at the chat right away. So if you add one more thing just to specify, it can be the lot number, it can be this Vacheron, that perpetual calendar chronograph, this time-only watch, whatever it is, because I can get confused very easily. But of all the watches that I talked about in the recent run, I don't necessarily think of any of the watches as ladies' watches, perhaps the gem set crash. I think overall the crash has been extremely popular in a unisex fashion more recently. It's never been my style. I don't get obsessed about whether a watch is masculine enough or too feminine for me. But then again, I also have my preferences, so I never really liked crash. And the fact that it is, to me, to my perception, a feminine watch might have a lot to do with it. That this particular example is gem set for me, it doesn't have much to add or subtract from it. I think overall crash is not my style anyways. I would rather have something like this asymmetrical tank instead of that. But that's just me. Yeah, and when it comes to the Cartier Tortue or the tanks that we looked at, whether it's the chronograph or the tank asymétrique, I don't know. I love them. I love them all, and I've never thought of them as being feminine. Again, that's not necessarily a question that's always at the top of my mind when I make choices for what watches to wear, what watches to recommend people. But when it comes to my own choices, of course, I do have certain preferences, and I never really had the hots for the crash, even before it was popular, after it's popular. I just don't, don't really care much for it. Lot 2566 is a two-hander reverso, which is an ultra-thin model that has a very special engraving on the back, or rather an enamel map. As you can see, the decoration of the center of the dial echoes with the gadroons that frame the dial itself, except of course these are vertical stripes rather than the horizontal stripes of the case itself. And there's a map of San Barthélemy, or Saint Bart's, the island's nation that is a département of France as well. Beautiful pink gold, which, as you guys know, is the metal, is the precious metal that you see most often from JLC. It's the 5N is kind of their preference when it comes to making precious metal and limited editions of JLC pieces, especially reversos. This is number 4 of a 15-piece run, again, of an ultra-thin reverso that has a map of St. Bart's on the case back. And this was a watch, as you can see, that sold for significantly less than the lower end of the estimates, which was 80,000 Hong Kong dollars, slightly above 10,000. Lot 2566 actually sold for 47,000 880, and that is roughly 6,150 in US dollars. Of course, no problem, no problem. It's a pleasure, but you know, sometimes I don't switch back and forth between the two screens as fast as I would like, so I don't always catch in real time what people are saying in the chats. I try to do my best to catch it, but if I miss it, sometimes I'm 3-5 minutes late, and you might be talking about a watch that I had on the screen 10 minutes ago, who knows. Lot 2567 is even of more interest to me. This belongs to a series of limited edition pieces that Gégé Lecoutre had released as part of their 90s revival. 500-piece runs of 6 different models that I like to call the Big Six. The recently revived tribute chronograph, for example, takes its inspiration from the chronograph that was made for this series. There was among these pieces the first complicated reverso that also introduced the 1991 Grand Taille case, the modern dimensions of the reverso, roughly 26 by 43 millimeters. There was a tourbillon for the first time. There was a chronograph, as I mentioned. There was a dual time watch. And there was a perpetual calendar. So all these complications that brought a new era, or that rather heralded a new era for the heritage watchmaker, the watchmaker's watchmaker, La Grande Maison, as they call it in French. This is the répétition minute, the minute repeater, which actually has the look of a time-only watch, right? Simple, unadorned caseback, very discreet slider on the flank, as you can see. The number in the series is engraved on the caseback. The piece is matched with a déployant clasp. What you see through this cutout at 5 o'clock is the part of the mechanism that's called the governor, which basically paces the chime of the minute repeater. So you will see it in action in a second in this. I have heard this once in person, but it was in a very crowded and noisy environment, so I can't really report legibly on that experience. I have to say it's not the most impressive minute repeater that I've ever heard, but the fact that it is actually in that iconic reverso case makes this a very important watch for the history of the maker, for fans of the reverso, and also for people who obsessively collect minute repeaters, which must be a very select group. This particular example, again, is one of the watches that performed admirably, performed relatively well. It's actually comes, I believe, with its original presentation material, which is very important for this kind of piece. And it sold for 27,600 in US dollars, which is a little more than 42,000. Sorry, 300. It sold for 327,600 Hong Kong dollars, which is a little more than 42,000 in US dollars. Again, that's right in the middle of, perhaps a little bit more close to the higher ceiling of that pre-auction estimates. So it's overall a decent result for the seller for the JLC reverso minute repeater at lot 2567. Again, if you want me to look at any particular watch, you can click the link and try to see if there's something you like. And if you send in the lot number with a super chat, I would be more than happy to dive right in with some significant horological and historical detail. We're looking at Vacheron Constantin one-of-a-kind platinum world timepiece, which has a Chanlevé enamel dial. A very, very interesting example of a watch. Of course, at that level, at that segment, we associate the world time complication with Patek, although they were neither the first nor the only manufacturer that specialized in making world time pieces. We can say that about the origins of the complication. We can say it also about now. There are, for example, under independent makers like Anderson Genève who make world timepieces that are arguably even more beautiful than what Patek has been traditionally producing. This is an example of Vacheron Constantin world time in platinum in a 42 millimeter case that was made as one of a kind for the 2013 edition of Only Watch, of the charity auction that has recently come under close scrutiny, as you know, and was postponed. It was supposed to take place earlier this month, but has been postponed until next year. And you might even say indefinitely. The platinum case and the Chanlevé enamel dial at the center distinguishes this particular example. Since the home base of the OmniWatch auction is Monaco, that's also highlighted in red as kind of the hometown within the city's ring, and the red is also used to distinguish the two parts of the 24-hour ring, to distinguish between day and night for that piece as well. This is the presentation material, and right here you can also see the déployant clasp. Here's a look at the movements that carries the Geneva hallmark and has a beautiful oscillating weight in 22 carats gold. This is the one-of-a-kind platinum Vacheron Constantin World Time with a Chanlevé enamel dial. Again, this is a piece that sold for less than half of the lower end of the estimates. The pre-auction estimate was set in the range between 750,000 to 1.5 million in Hong Kong dollars. And this watch actually sold for 327,600 in Hong Kong dollars. That is a little more than 42,000 Swiss francs, which you might say is a bargain for the person who won. Lot 2577 is from the same auction. I mean, imagine the kind of collector Patrick Getreide is, right? You know, he bought not one, but multiple watches from the 2013 auction of the OmniWatch. This was Roger Dubuis, one-of-a-kind tourbillon, in the appropriately named case La Monégasque, which is their rendition of the cushion-shaped case, here in 43 millimeter diameter in 18 karat pink gold. The tourbillon is offset at 7 o'clock, and you also have the micro rotor for the self-winding movements that is given an equal prominence at 11 o'clock as well. Beautifully detailed. The watch looks, I think, a very striking combination of tradition and modernity. A beautiful two-tone dial in black and anthracite gray, dashes of pink gold, which matches the case. and also, of course, the two cutouts that give you a proportional and equivalent presentation of both the micro rotor and the tourbillon cage as well, the micro rotor oscillating weight and the tourbillon cage. And of course, you can get another look at the flying tourbillon from the semi-skeletonized back. This movement is assembled, finished, and regulated according to the standards that befit the hallmark of Geneva. A one-of-a-kind piece, again, that was bought in the 2013 edition of the Omni watch. The Roger Dubuis La Monégasque one-of-a-kind tourbillon in 18-karat pink gold. Once again, a watch that sold for about less than half of the lower end of the estimates. The pre-auction estimate was set between 550,000 to 1,100,000 in Swiss francs. Sorry, Hong Kong dollars. The price realized was 339,400. And that is right around 30,750 in US dollars. Again, for a one-of-a-kind watch, for someone who wanted to actually get this, for someone who collects some of the Roger Dubuis pieces from an earlier period, this could have been a bargain. Corporate office, yes, actually, I was talking about that. I did the introduction on this auction in the early show, and there were two watches that were highlighted by Jose Perez, Periscope, a friend of the channel, as you guys know, who comes every so often on this channel to talk about some of his exposés and sometimes on his historical studies as well. But on his Instagram, he had highlighted some important inconsistencies about 2537, lot 2537, which is a Breguet diver that looks a little too good to be true and too perfect. I detailed that in the early show today. And you can always go to periscope.com, but perhaps more immediately, you can look at instagram.com/periscope for some of the details of his short expose that details the inconsistencies that this piece has with some of the legitimate examples that have previously surfaced publicly. And in his Instagram story, he was also talking about lot 2607, which is Patek reference 1436, a split-second chronograph from Patek Philippe from 1950. Here, it's basically sold. It was basically advertised, let's put it like this, because this is another lot that eventually didn't sell. but it was advertised as one of a kind due to its unique black dial. But it turns out that this watch actually was sold by Sotheby's New York in 1992 with a silver dial. And when you look at the archival extract that accompanies it on this sale as well, there's just no mention of the black dial, which is kind of strange because most of the value of this watch rests in that black dial. I don't want to go into a long lecture on this. We can perhaps have an entire episode on this later. But because of their rarity, black dial watches are very aspirational and intensely desired in the world of vintage Patek Philippe. So that was another inconsistency that was highlighted by Jose Perez earlier today. And I don't think it's a coincidence that these watches did not actually sell in today's auction. Another watch that sold, but sold for much less than, again, what was expected if you look at the pre-auction estimates. This is an Ashmoser et Company piece, lot 2578, a one-of-a-kind example of the Endeavour Perpetual Moon that was made for the 2019 edition of the Only Watch. .42 millimeter 18 karat pink gold case with the Vanta black dial and a moon phase indicator at 6 o'clock, which is extremely precise to the point that it only deviates by 1 day after 1027 years. Again, a watch that was bought as part of an Only Watch auction, as part of a charity auction back in 2019. The pre-auction estimate was set between 480,000 to 950,000 in Swiss francs. I love this mustachio bridge that Moza pieces have. And I like the fact that it is highlighted here in red as well. The characteristic double stripe decoration of the bridges, that signature Moza. And you can also take a look at this power reserve indicator on through the exhibition case back in a way that's integrated onto the bridge. This is the Ashmoser et Company Endeavour Perpetual Moon concept for Only Watch 2019, which was lot number 2578. It sold for 163,800 in Hong Kong dollars, which is a little more than 21,000 in US dollars. Once again, I think for the segment in which these watches seem to operate, that seems to be an absolute bargain. I do want to talk about the watch that is in my thumbnail before it's too late, because I have about half an hour left. This is an early example of the Universal Genève Tri-Compacts, or Universal Genève Tri-Compacts, with a dashing jumbo stainless steel case with downturned lugs, very beautiful, 37 millimeters in stainless steel. And I think it also has a case shape that will make it wear even a little larger than that. Kind of teardrop shaped applied hour markers that go well with the leaf shaped hands for the hour and minutes. The 3 chronograph registers have hands that are stainless steel and heat blued. The tachometer on the periphery of the dial is also inscribed in a similar shade, and the pointer date at 12 o'clock, which encircles the moon phase indicator, which encircles the opening for the moon phase indicator, has a red hand, which makes it actually quite legible. I, of course, always love the anthropomorphic expression of the moon phase. And of course, you also have the 2 aperture that flank that pointer dates that are at 12 o'clock, right above the signature for the day of the week and the month. This is a great example of the Universal Genève Tri-Compacts with the early caliber 287. So we're talking about early to mid 40s. And once again, this is a piece that sold for less than the lower end of the estimates. And the price realized at the end of the day was 75,600 in Hong Kong dollars, which is a little more than 9,700 in US dollars. Another watch that I wanted to talk about, if only because it will allow me to show off one of my books, I believe. I think it should be here. Is lot 2605. This is an Audemars Piguet perpetual calendar from an early age, from 1957. It's one of the earliest perpetual calendars to have leap year indicator on the dial, as you can see. Hey, Glenn, how are you doing, man? Corporate office, it's my pleasure. I love it. I love it. I live for this, as you know. So this is one of the watches that didn't sell, but it's really one of the heaviest hitters on this auction. Of course, it didn't sell precisely because it was one of those high-ticket items. Perhaps not the best time to be trying to sell a watch like this. The pre-auction estimates was set between 6.5 million to 13 million in Hong Kong dollars, and the lower end of that estimates accordingly corresponds to a little more than 830,000 in Swiss francs. This is really some of the most stunning examples of complicated watchmaking from that mid-century period. You guys already know how rare Patek Philippe perpetual calendars and perpetual calendar chronographs are from the same period. We talk quite a bit about 1518s and 1526s, which would be 1526 would be the Patek Philippe equivalent from this time period for this watch. But think of it like this. There were approximately 210 examples made of that Patek Philippe perpetual calendar from the same time period, the reference 1526. You're looking here at arguably a more horologically significant example of a perpetual calendar. But objectively, you're looking at a much more rare watch, because this is only one of the 6 pieces that were ever made by AP. Only 4 of them actually are known to exist, and I think this is one of the only ones, one of the 4. Let me see if I can show you this. Okay. So this is my book on the complicated wristwatches of the 20th century by AP. And this is a watch that actually is noted by the caliber number on this page in that cutout from the archives as number 73013. But more importantly, it explains here that there are only 6 examples made, 4 known to the public, and 3 of them held in the AP museum. So I believe this watch that just didn't sell today from the one-of-a-kind collection is basically the only example that ever came up on sale publicly, of course. And of the 3 pieces that are held at the AP museum, one of them is actually loaned to AP by Tiffany, because it's from their collection. And this is that watch. As you can see, at 6 o'clock, it is signed by Tiffany in addition to AP. Oh. Right. So this is the reference 5516. possibly the crown jewel of the oak collection, the one-of-a-kind collection, because it's one of those pieces that really lives up to that designation. Already quite impressive, being a complicated wristwatch from the time period, from AP. Even more impressive because it's arguably more horologically complex than its Patek counterpart, than the reference 1526, because it has the leap year indicator on the dial. We're talking about a watch from 1957 in this particular case. And of course, it's very impressive because it is one of only 6 examples ever made, and possibly the only one that has and that will ever come up in a public sale in our time. Pristine condition, as you can see. Very classical case with a slightly protruding and extremely elegant midsection, sharply downturned claw-like lugs in 18 karat yellow gold, 36.5 millimeters in diameter. And here's a look at the movements. Which looks absolutely stunning. Obviously, someone should build a more contemporary movement that is inspired by this look. Look at those broad and beautiful stripes that decorate the bridges. Wow. Beautiful watch. Too bad it did not sell. That was lot 2605. Would have been fantastic to see even a record for a piece like this, because it is certainly worthy. But that wasn't meant to be. I also wanted to take a look at a watch that I highlighted on my Instagram a number of times. This is a watch that did sell, even though not necessarily with a great performance for the seller. So this is a watch that once belonged to the famous French actor Jean-Paul Belmondo. Here you can see him wearing that triple dates chronograph at the 1974 iteration of the Cannes Film Festival. This is what the watch looks like. And previously it was sold by Christie's in Geneva as lot 130 at their rare watches, including important private collections. That was back in 2016. on May 16th, 75,000 Swiss francs. It sold today for 1,071,000 in Hong Kong dollars. And that amounts to 137,520 in US dollars. And the piece was actually bought originally by Monsieur Belmondo in 1973 for a sum of 3,500 French francs. And that Belmondo may be the actor Jean-Paul, or his father, who was a famous sculptor and who also had a penchant for some beautiful pieces himself. Hi, Glenn, if I didn't say hi before. Nice to see you. I really like this piece as well. To me, it has all the charm of Patek 1518. It has all the charm of Rolex Jean-Claude Killy Dato Compacts. Obviously, it's a triple date, 3-register chronograph with a moon phase indicator and not a perpetual calendar. But I would, in terms of its aesthetic appeal and in terms of its vintage charm, I certainly have no problem mentioning it in the same breath as Patek Perpetual Calendar that is so iconic as the 1518. And obviously, from the standpoint of a certain aesthetic flair, I also have no problem putting it in the same basket as generations of Rolex triple dates chronographs that will forever remain associated to the famous sports personality, Olympic skier, French Jean-Claude Killy. Now we have a little more time. I will be back tomorrow, so I don't need to rush. I can focus on some of the heavy hitters that have performed actually really well. You can certainly count the 2 Acrivias that were sold in that group. You can certainly count some of the Voutilainen pieces that I didn't cover in the morning in that group. Again, the Acrivias performed quite well. The Voutilainen pieces, by and large, performed well, if not necessarily reaching groundbreaking prices, if not necessarily breaking records, or even getting quite close to the upper ceiling of their estimates, but they have sold, and they have sold well. the FP Jaune pieces sold relatively well, and they ranged from quite a usual example of a chronomètre bleu, octa lune, and chronomètre souverain. But they also included an example from 2022, which was one of only 20 pieces. It has a lot of interesting details. Because this is one of only 99 examples that were released to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the octa caliber of FP Jaune's self-winding movement that was quite groundbreaking at its time. It was a world record when it was first introduced, that it had a 5-day power reserve, and it remains that movement that FP Jaune, that François-Paul Jaune simply does not even revise, does not even bother revising, because he thinks that it has been quite perfect since its initial introduction. And again, this is a watchmaker, as you know, who is obsessed with improving upon his own inventions, who is quite invested in the invention aspect of his brands, as well as he is interested in the practicality, right? Invenit et fecit. That's what it's. That's what the brand follows. That's the motto. This is an example of a platinum octa réserve de marche, 40 millimeters in diameter for a platinum case, one of only 99 pieces, released in 2021 to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the octa self-winding movement. It pays homage to early octa models and prototypes. It has a throwback brass movement, which is rhodium plated, as you can see, with a circular finish at the center of the bridge plates, and an off-center rotor in 22 karat gold that has barley corn guilloche, a yellow gold dial, which again is a throwback because I believe they have long been discontinued otherwise, much like the brass movements. And also, just like the prototypes of the octa, the 7 and 5 have disappeared from the silver dial that is bolted on the yellow gold background as well. Hey Glenn, I'm Basically, a fan of anything and everything Breguet. I think, except for some of the more recent releases they have done in the Type 20 range, which I'm not a huge fan of, it's hard for me to find a watch from Breguet that I don't like in some way. For those who don't know, Ora Mundi is basically Breguet's take on the world time concept. So again, this watch is really important because it's one of 99, because it is one of those preciously limited runs of watches that have a brass movement. The only exception, of course, to that, the only other exception, I should say, is the T30, the 30th anniversary tourbillon, which is in and of itself reincarnation, a rethinking of the original pocket watch tourbillon that F.P. Jean made in 1983, and that was actually the first watch with the Jean name on the dial. Other than that series, this is the first time there's a brass movement, and this is actually an F.P. Jean movement that comes back in brass for this 40 millimeter platinum case. So lots 2584 was predictably popular and sold more or less at the estimated value. The hammer price was finally 1,386,000 in Hong Kong dollars, which is basically 178,000 in US dollars. That was one of the more successful lots from the Oak Collection Part 1, which is a single owner collection that came on the block earlier today at Christie's Hong Kong. I have a couple more watches to talk about before I close the show today. If you have any last minute requests, feel free to squeeze it in with a super chat. Any watch related question is welcome. If you want me to take a look at any of the watches from this auction that I'm yet to highlight, feel free to send in the lot number with a super chat. I will be more than happy to dive in some significant detail for you. But now that we said Ora Mundi, I think there was an Ora Mundi here that was listed, and right here it's actually a watch that was sold as lot 2533. As you can see, this is Breguet reference 5717 in platinum with a 43 43 millimeter platinum case. At the center of the dial, there is a map depicting the American continents applied by engine turning, a wave motif that depicts the seas coated with translucent lacquer, I think it is a beautiful dial. And look at that moon phase at 3:30. There's a beautiful aperture that opens to what looks like a lapis lazuli stone for the night sky background. I'm not so sure, but the detail is amazing. The anthropomorphic moon phase, which is beautifully framed by this depiction, by this romantic depiction of clouds. Of course, on that disc, you can also see the Breguet signature as well as the caliber number, which is very traditional for Breguet. It's a practice that has been adopted all the way back when Abraham Louis Breguet was making pocket watches. And you have an adapted version of the Breguet hands for the hour and minutes with larger loops, perhaps to avoid interrupting your vision of this beautiful depiction of the American continents at the center of your dial, kind of an observatory style for that reason. The city's ring peaks through at 6 o'clock with the arrow indicating your home base. Pardon me. I also like how they matched this with that particular strap. Here's a look from the back. Of course, there is an additional crown at 7 o'clock, as you can see from here. That allows you to jump from city to city. And of course, the opening up there actually gives you the dates. And I should correct myself, of course, at 3:30 or between 3 and 4. That's a day-night indicator, not a moon phase. That also allows you to have a sense of whether it is day or night in your reference time, which is very handy, of course, when you're actually trying to keep track of time in a second time zone. This was the reference 5717, Breguet Oramundi in platinum, their take on the self-winding world time watch, which sold for less than the lower end of the estimates at lot 2533. That was 252,000 in Hong Kong dollars, which amounts to a little more than 32,350 in US dollars. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow in the evening, around 8 p.m. my time. I'm in Los Angeles, so that is Pacific Standard Time. Hopefully, we'll wrap up the discussion of this auction and, of course, talk about watches more broadly. I do want to talk about some other auctions that have taken place or that are taking place in Hong Kong as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll finish this month strong with a birthday celebration and giveaway that is going to take place on Thursday. Between then and now, I also have the second episode of References and Auction Results, covering at least a selection of Patek Philippe minute repeaters. Hopefully that will be on Tuesday, which is already tomorrow, basically, because we have just turned the midnight here. Please hit the like button on your way out. Feel free to support the channel in any way you can. If that is simply watching the videos and clicking the like button, that's already quite generous. If you could share the links with your friends and fellow collectors, that's even appreciated even more. If you send in super chats, super thanks, super stickers, like Ali Reza, Jake Brooks, and Swinging Kangaroo did today. Ali Reza also gifted some memberships. That's even great. Speaking of which, you can, of course, sign up for memberships to gain access to some exclusive content. And of course, there are links in the video description that give you some other options to contribute as well. Once again, this is a channel that is completely independent, that is not beholden to any industry interests, that is not sponsored by some gray market seller. Other watch journalists, as you see, literally sit on the laps of the big brand CEOs. You won't find any of that here. Joking aside, I love Waco, and I at least used to be a big fan of the revolution, but I just wanted to drive this point home. it is an interesting world out there. I love you all. I do my best to bring what I know and what I feel strongly about from the world of watches, and any support you can give me is very deeply appreciated. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and hopefully have a banging finish to the month. And then December is ours. There will be a number of marathons, and I look forward to talking about watches with you, hopefully with some of you jumping on the panel on those occasions. On that note, thank you also to Ali, who was on my panel earlier. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, be safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. Take care, guys.